Hello there. In this video, I'm going to talk about the Winchester Streetcar. This is one of Toronto's most obscure streetcar lines, and I'm willing to bet that only the most hardcore of transit historians in the city even knew that this streetcar line existed. So, let's get into the video. The origins of the Winchester Streetcar begin in the late 1800s. Specifically as part of the Sherbourne Streetcar, which from its inception in 1874 would Y at the intersection of Parliament Street and Winchester Street. This service, however, would operate until July 26, 1881, when the Winchester Streetcar was split off from the Sherbourne Streetcar. This line would use horse-drawn cars and operate from York Street, east on Front Street, then north on Church Street. From there, the line would then run east on King Street, north on Sherbourne Street, east on Carlton Street, north on Parliament Street, and then west along Winchester Street to Shumock Street. The line along Winchester Street would be double-tracked up to Sackville Street. East of that, the line would be a single track to Shumock Street. On October 23, 1891, the Winchester Streetcar would be merged with the Davenport Streetcar as an experiment. Now, it must be noted, the Davenport Streetcar in this case was not the one operated by the Davenport Street Railway, and then eventually the Toronto Suburban Railway. The Davenport Streetcar in this case was operated by the Toronto Street Railway, and to my understanding was a northern extension of the Seton Village Streetcar, and operated in parallel with the Bathurst Streetcar between Bloor Street and the CP Rail tracks north of Dupont Street. The route would start at the aforementioned CP Rail tracks and then travel south on Bathurst Street to King Street and then east to York Street. From there, the route would then head south to Front Street and then follow its normal route to Shumock Street. This service would only operate for a couple weeks before being split. On September 26, 1892, the line would be rerouted along Front Street to Church Street and then north from there to Carlton Street before following its normal routing. On September 28, 1893, the line would be electrified and rerouted up Yonge Street to Carlton Street. Starting in January of 1894, the Winchester Streetcar and the Parliament Streetcar would be merged on a trial run basis. At this time, the route would operate from Front Street and York Street, east to Church Street and north to King Street. The line would then run east on King Street to Sherbourne Street and north to Queen Street. The route would then run east on Queen Street to Parliament Street and north to Winchester Street. The route would then travel east to Shumock Street. On October 16, 1894, the trial service with the Parliament Streetcar would end, and instead the Winchester Streetcar would be merged with the Bathurst Streetcar. This route would follow the Bathurst Streetcar route from the CP Rail tracks south to King Street and east to York Street. The line would then travel south to Front Street and east to Yonge Street. The line would then travel north to Carlton Street before following its normal routing back to a newly built Y at Shumock Street. On January 26, 1895, the route would be split off from the Bathurst Streetcar. In December of 1896, the line would begin looping through the downtown core via Yonge Street, Front Street, York Street, and King Street. On December 18, 1911, the Winchester Streetcar would now operate from a Y at Adelaide Street and Victoria Street. The route would then travel north on Victoria Street and east along Wilton Square, which later became part of Dundas Street, and Dundas Street itself, and then north on Parliament Street and then east on Winchester Street to the Y at Shumock Street. On April 1, 1912, the south end of the line would be rerouted via Richmond Street, Church Street, and Adelaide Street. On November 1, 1913, downtown-bound streetcars during the afternoon rush hour would begin looping via Church Street, Adelaide Street, Victoria Street, and Wilton Square. On October 2, 1921, a month after the TTC took over streetcar operations, the Winchester Streetcar would be rerouted for the last time. This change in service would see the line operate from the Y at Shumock Street, west along Winchester Street, and south on Parliament Street to Queen Street. From here, the route would then travel west to a clockwise loop via Church Street, Richmond Street, and Victoria Street. The days for the Winchester Streetcar, however, would be numbered, as at this time the TTC was extending the tracks along Parliament Street north to Bloor Street. These new tracks would be put into service on June 30th, 1923, and with them came the end of the Winchester Streetcar, ending 42 years of service. The tracks along Winchester Street would remain in place for a couple of years but would eventually be paved over. Service would be replaced on August 3, 1924 by the Winchester bus, which operated a very short 460-meter route from Parliament Street to Schumacher Street, wying at both ends. This bus route would be abolished on September 27, 1930 due to low ridership. As an aside, at a length of roughly 460 meters, this has to be the shortest bus route in TTC history. For perspective, that is nearly the equivalent of walking from one end of the Eaton Center to the other. It's surprising this bus route lasted 6 years. The reason for the end of the Winchester Streetcar was essentially it no longer fit into the network. The reason the line existed at all was simply because that was as far as the tracks along Parliament Street went at the time. Once the tracks along Parliament Street were extended north to Bloor Street, Winchester no longer served a purpose. The Winchester Streetcar spent most of its route paralleling other routes, and the section of track along Winchester Street was just mostly there out of convenience. It is hard to justify tracks and streetcar service along such a quiet street any other way. Today, nothing remains of the Winchester Streetcar, or more accurately, the line along Winchester Street itself. A lot of the other infrastructure it used does still exist. It's crazy to think that such a quiet, out-of-the-way road once had streetcar service, and that service lasted 42 years. Today, Winchester Street is just another street, one that the overwhelming majority of Torontonians have never heard of, and you could walk by it without noticing. Yet, for 42 years, streetcars would run up and down it. As for a modern Winchester streetcar, the answer to that question is a simple no. The route spent its entire existence paralleling other lines, and the small section of track it did run alone on was on a quiet residential street. It seems to me that the Winchester streetcar was born out of circumstance and to probably bring streetcar access closer to those in this particular corner of the Cabbagetown neighborhood. Ultimately, when the tracks on Parliament Street went north, there was no longer a need for the Winchester streetcar. Yet, for 42 years, this quiet residential street played host to one of Toronto's most obscure, yet possibly important streetcar lines. And with that, I will end this video here. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it and want to see more like it, please hit that subscribe button because there are more videos like it on the channel and there are more videos like it on the way. If there's anything you want to say about the Winchester streetcar, don't be afraid to do so in the comments section down below. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.